as a family and have a family gathering. Obviously, with our social distancing guidelines and not meeting in person, it's a little different. We wanted to make sure to take advantage of this opportunity to celebrate some very special people. As you can see, we're in our very own Henniger High School. We get the opportunity to partner with Henniger on many different things throughout the course of the year. Because of your generosity and your giving, one of the biggest things we do is at the beginning of every year, we provide them a back-to-school meal for all of the teachers, and we've been able to enlist other businesses to join us in that, and we're very proud to be able to say, Henniger, whatever you guys need, we're here for you. But we want to honor our seniors today, so stay tuned. You're going to get a chance to meet some of them. But before we do, we want to say welcome, welcome. If you're new to Forward Point, we would love the opportunity to get to know you better. If you take a moment, there's a couple different ways that you can fill out our digital connection card. First, if you just text the word welcome to the number 315-883-2213, that will send that digital connection card right to your cell phone, and you can fill it out there. Or if you're on our online church experience, you can just click on the connect button, and that will get you connected to our digital connection card. So all sorts of different ways we would love to be able to meet you and do life with you as we move forward. Forward Point is a community of faith, hope, and love. We are here to help people find their purpose. We believe that you were created on purpose, for a purpose, and any part that we can play in that journey is why we are here. If you are involved with kids, if you have any kids at all, we want to invite you back to our Kid Min time tonight at 6:30. We have a private Facebook group that we get the families together right before bed to be able to do a fun time of singing and dancing and learning. So if you'd like to join us for that, please come on out at 6:30, and you can message us on Facebook to learn more information about that, okay? A couple different ways you can give this morning if you came prepared to do that. You can give right through your cell phone. Again, pretty easy. Any amount you can text to the short code 84321, and that will allow you to give right from your phone, as well as you can give by going to our website, forwardpoint.org, and there's a give link up at the top, and that will allow you to be able to give from there. Or again, at our online church experience, there'll be a give button that you can just click on right there that will take you to a real safe, secure option to be able to give from there, okay? Again, we love our seniors, so we thought if you didn't know them, you would love them too if you got a chance to meet them. So here's a chance to meet our seniors.
So, my name's Talia. I've started going to Forward Point a few months ago. I lead the FCA huddle up at Henniger. So this is how I learned about Forward Point and just the youth group through the church and just young life, and so now I'm here. I go to Henniger High School. My sister also goes to Henniger. She's younger. And I've grown up in Syracuse, and I'm also planning on going to Syracuse University for college. One of my favorite memories from school definitely had to be when FCA had a former Cleveland Browns player come talk to everyone. And his name was William Green. And it was just really cool because a lot of kids came to Christ that night, and it was really awesome. My sophomore year, I went through a pretty big bout of anxiety, and I ended up being hospitalized. But during the hospitalization, the doctor told me that I was undergoing a spiritual attack. And doctors don't normally do that. So it was really, really interesting that the doctor told me that. And just now I lead the huddle, and I couldn't have seen myself doing this unless I went through what I went through. I'm going to Syracuse University next year to major in biochem and possibly major in psychology also. I want to go into genetics to see the genetic connection behind mental illness, because mental illness is a big thing for me. But I also feel like God's calling me to Syracuse because of the FCA huddle there, and then the connections I have to Henniger and Young Life and all of those ministries. Definitely sophomore year when I went through that bout of anxiety, because if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't be where I am today and be concerned about mental health and just be an advocate for it. But also, this quarantine has been a thing that like has taught me a lot, because it's taught me to like slow down and actually like focus on God rather than just like whatever's happening in the world and what He wants me to learn. So.
Graduating this year. I'm going to SU to study mechanical engineering. I've lived in Syracuse all my life. I'm graduating from the Syracuse Academy of Science. Been quite a few memories I've enjoyed. One was getting to go to Europe. That was fun. Got to be on my own for a week. Oh well, with a group of people. Teachers, friends, that was fun. Over the summer of 10th grade, I got to spend a few weeks at SUNY Oswego. That was fun. Robotics competitions were fun. A lot of good times there. Also some slightly emotional times. But while over my time at SES, I've been doing robotics. And that's always been like one of my main after-school activities, and it's been something that I've really enjoyed doing. So going to school to study mechanical engineering just kind of seems like a no-brainer to me. It's something I've been passionate about and spent a lot of time doing over the past 5 years. So getting to dive deeper into that is going to be really fun. A competition where we were at the bottom and everybody was down, and we felt like we couldn't pull through. But then at the very end, we made a comeback, and we got to go to the next stage in the competition. Just all the hard work that we put in, it kind of felt like we were breaking down. But then at the last moment, we were just able to put in the last effort, the push, and it got us through. Coming to Forward Point, that was a big step for me. Most of the other churches before Forward Point, I didn't really enjoy going to. But at Forward Point, I feel like I kind of found my way.
Earlier this year,
I walked the halls of my high school.
for the last time,
I went to my last college lecture.
I saw some of my classmates and teachers
for the very last time.
And I didn't even know it.
I had so many expectations of what was to come.
senior breakfast,
Prom,
That feeling when you finish the last exam. Being the first person in my family.
to get handed a college diploma.
Walking across the stage.
All eyes on me.
Good luck hugs.
and final waves goodbye.
It's supposed to be my time.
My time.
My time.
My time.
A celebration of hard journeys and sweet victories.
Proof that I didn't quit.
But in a blink of an eye,
Everything changed.
And despite celebrations lost,
Victories not received.
honors not given.
I'm taking something with me.
Not something taught in class.
But something taught.
In life.
I can do all things.
All things.
Do all things.
I can do all things through Christ.
Who gives me strength.
But it's not just about me.
There's still some people I have to thank.
Because no one crosses the finish line alone.
I want to thank my parents for believing in me no matter what.
And reminding me every day that I can do anything I set my mind to.
For praying for me every day and pushing me.
I want to thank my coach for convincing me that I can do anything.
I want to thank my professors for helping prepare me for God's plan for my life.
It's for helping me stay confident.
You helped me stand strong even when I didn't think I could.
I want to thank my choir and drama teachers for showing me how to use my talents in a way that honors God. I want to thank my parents for helping me fulfill my dreams.
And told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it.
I want to thank all of my teachers
For going above and beyond to help me succeed. showed me how to embrace creative thinking.
Hopeful living.
I want to thank my small group leaders.
You pointed me toward God.
So I will stand in His strength.
I'll step out with grace over grief.
With courage over fear.
I will love God.
I will love others.
And I will make my mark in this world.
I'll make my mark in this world.
And I will make my mark in this world.
I
am a graduate.
the Lord this morning here? Come on, he's going to take our graves and turn them into gardens, church. I search the world. I search the world. It couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise and treasures the fade are never enough. Then you came along and pulled me back together. And every desire is now satisfied. You're hearing your love. Sing with us. Oh, there's nothing. And no, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. And nothing is better than you. Sing it again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace will find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. Sing it again. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one. You turn graves. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one. You're the only one who can. Keep worshiping, church. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes.
was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Ooh, the sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. I am chosen. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am who you say I am. The sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. have been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. Thank you, Jesus. We praise you, Lord. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child. You split the sea. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am a I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of
Father God, we just thank you so much that we are called children of God. You say in your word that if you abide in me, you belong to me. You're not a slave, but you're a son and daughter. Because a servant doesn't belong in its master's house, but a son and daughter does. And when we receive you, we receive the free gift of salvation that comes through knowing that you died for our sins, that you want us to have a life with more purpose than we've ever experienced before. You can set us free, and we can become a child of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Most violent night of protests so far in Minneapolis.
Anger over the death of George Floyd boiling over as protesters gained access to a police station overnight, setting fire to the building. 500 soldiers with the Minnesota National Guard have now been activated to respond to the growing violence.
At least 170 businesses have been damaged so far. This is video of a liquor store on fire. The fire chief saying, quote, "We will aggressively fight these fires, but will retreat if it's not safe." An estimated 4,000 people marched peacefully through Minneapolis earlier. But as night fell, other protesters set fires, destroying that 3rd Police Precinct and businesses. More than 30 fires were set the previous night. Target is now temporarily closing 24 stores in the Twin Cities after people were seen looting some of its stores in the area. New video shows a woman in a wheelchair punched and sprayed with a fire extinguisher after she tried to block protesters from entering one of those stores. And now the protests spreading to more cities across the country, including New York City, where police arrested at least 40 people. In Los Angeles and in Denver, dozens gathered at the state capitol. Shots were reportedly fired, and one person was hit by a car. Many of the demonstrators chanting, "I can't breathe." The president says the Justice Department and FBI are investigating, along with County Prosecutor Mike Freeman.
I'm here to announce that former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is in custody. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been charged by the Hennepin County Attorney's Office with murder and with manslaughter.
Our community, especially our Black community, is hurting beyond words. Minneapolis and St. Paul are on fire. Generations of pain is manifesting itself in front of the world, and the world is watching.
This morning, the CDC issuing new guidelines on reopening offices across America. They suggest desk shields, temperature checks, and an end to communal coffee pots. The pressure to reopen more of America is growing. As we enter another weekend, cases of the virus are rising in 17 states, many in the South. In Alabama, at least 14 people have now died in a rural nursing home. In Minnesota, ICU beds are starting to fill up in Minneapolis, which is now projected to see a shortage of beds in 3 weeks. Neighboring Wisconsin also seeing a surge, now canceling the state fair for the first time in 75 years. And even though Georgia is not one of the states highlighted with rising cases, a new virus cluster is linked to a private school graduation.
Which makes more sense, is that it was after it was over and people went to parties.
And more concerns at food processing plants. In Washington state, 70 workers at this fruit plant testing positive, 61 of them with no symptoms.
Pro-democracy activists say China's new security law aimed at crushing protests in Hong Kong paves the way for total domination by China. The local government, backed by Beijing, claims the civil liberties of the protesters are not in jeopardy. But President Trump now says he's weighing new sanctions against China.
Hi there, I'm meteorologist Rob Marciano. Hope you're doing well on this Friday. Let's go over the severe weather that broke out across the central U.S. yesterday, and then we'll take you through the forecast. Here's Kansas City, which has seen about 6 to 8 inches of rain in the last 7 days, and almost half of that came yesterday, so they had over a dozen calls for water rescues, and there you see some of it. We had 7 reports of tornadoes in Illinois and heavy wind, and there you see some hail across Texas City, Texas. Quieter weather expected across the Lone Star State and drier weather.
To say it's been a busy week would be a grave understatement. Right, a lot has happened over the past week, and even more so over the past couple days, and even last night in our own community, as we saw a lot of anger and it expressed itself through some not nice ways as a result of a very tragic event that took place. And it's a lot going on, and we kind of begin to wonder, coming out of this last week, thinking, maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and we find ourselves almost taking maybe a step forward, and now 3, 4, 5 steps back at all the mounting things that are going on in the world. This last week, I even found myself kind of in a much smaller situation where being on the wrong side of the actions. In my neighborhood, there's a guy who walks his dog on a fairly regular basis, and one time I was out on my own walk, and I saw him, and his dog was doing his thing that he shouldn't be doing, unless you're going to pick up after him. But he decided not to do that. And that moment that I saw him at first, I said, everyone has kind of those times when you forget your supplies, or, it's probably just an oversight. It was a quick rush to get your dog out the door. I can understand the pressure to hurry up because the dog's got its look in its face, right? So I brushed it off. But then a few days later, I was in my office working, and I remember seeing the same guy. He's pretty recognizable because I see him all the time, and he's across the street, and the same thing's happening. And his dog's doing his business, and afterwards just walks away as if no care in the world. And, it's kind of far away. I didn't really have a chance to mention anything. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, should I talk to the guy? Should I tell him, it's not really right for you to be doing that in the community. There's kids playing and things are happening. And I didn't really do anything. And then a couple days later after that, my wife comes to me and tells me that guy is in our yard and his dog is doing his business in our yard. And I see him walking as he makes the turn. And again, I have this opportunity to either walk out and kind of, in a neighborly way, meet him and say, hey, it's not cool, dude. I'd appreciate it if you pick up after your dog, right? Because it's one thing to, again, have forgotten your supplies, but it's another thing to constantly make it a habit of going on a walk, having no supplies, almost saying to the community, I don't really care what my dog does to the neighborhood. And I'm hemming and hawing, the guy's getting further away, and I'm not really doing anything. So finally I get it. I'm going to track him down. I'm going to take his picture, and I'm going to blast it on social media, see if anybody knows him. So, I got police buddies. I'm going to get them to whatever fine or whatever's going to happen, because we're going to make a point out of him. Because he has this just blatant disrespect for his neighbors and his community. So that's what I did. I'm not going to show you the pictures that I took because I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that I resorted to hiding in my car, following him like some kind of, secret agent and taking snaps out of him through my window and then posting them on Facebook. If you're here in the Eastwood neighborhood Facebook page, you've probably seen it, and I posted it, and not one of my finest moments. Again, I relied on the easy way out of just jumping on social media, blasting my case, and then, in social media is what often happens. It divides everybody because there's the people who agree with me, and there's the people who say get a life and grow up. It's just dog poop, and truthfully, they're both right. And it kind of just leaves you wondering, right? What's going on in the world is something as small as that, where we resort to thinking that our wars and battles are going to be won on Facebook, on social media. We look out in the world and we retreat to our phones or to our computers and think that, if we post enough things, if we say enough things, if we tweet enough things, then that somehow is bringing awareness. That's somehow making change. And maybe it's not. But in the midst of the craziness, we got to believe, He's still got the whole world in his hands. There's something in me that wants justice for the city that I love. From the actions that took place last night, I want to fight to make it a better place, and I'm ashamed that I withdrew into my office and used Facebook. Compared to the events of the world, I know my story seems, kind of minuscule and doesn't matter much. But maybe if I just said something the first time when I saw it happen, then we wouldn't have had the following instances. Church, we're living in some uncertain times, and we've experienced riots before, and we've experienced wars before, and we've experienced viruses before. But it kind of feels like, I don't know if we've ever experienced all of them at the same time. And that's where we're at. I don't, in my generation, ever remember experiencing anything like this before. And one of the most uncertain times in human history took place in this very private room where Jesus was with his closest friends. We know it and remember it as the Last Supper. And what's going on is they're gathered for the Passover meal. And it's a meal that the Jewish people would remember and celebrate and reenact every year to remember what had happened some 1,400 years ago. It was the meal that the Jewish families ate that night before they were set free centuries ago from slavery. And it was a meal to remember God's faithfulness, how after 400 years of praying and seeming like God was not answering, right? 400 years of prayers. I mean, after like 4 hours of unanswered prayer, we think, man, God must not be real. But here's the Jewish nation, 400 years of unanswered prayer, finally being able to say, tomorrow we're going to be free. And the reality is that the Jewish people did not start off as slaves in Egypt. They started off as a family. And they were invited into the country of Egypt through Joseph, as Joseph helped spare Egypt in a time of great famine. And their family was honored in Egypt. But something happened as this family began to grow in number. The Egyptians, they saw that and they began to fear what could happen if the Jewish people became too many. So they made them slaves. As we often do when we see something that we fear, we begin to exert our control over it. And deeper than any racism that may drive people to do what they do is this fear. And when we are fearful, we begin to devise how we might take control over our fears, take control over the source of that which we don't understand or that which we don't know. Uncertainty is nothing new. The times are uncertain, but God is not uncertain. He's still got the whole world in his hands. So how do we, as we recognize what was happening, right? Pharaoh experienced what was going on, and he wouldn't let them go until finally one night Moses said, all right, people, have this meal and take the lamb and take the blood's lamb and put it on your doorpost, because what's going to happen is the death angel is going to come through and kill every firstborn. But when it sees the blood of the lamb on your doorstep, it's going to pass over. And that night, every firstborn of Egypt died. And the next morning, Pharaoh let them free. The Egyptians, right, as they're leaving, loaded up with all their wealth, just as to say, get out of here, we don't want you anymore in our land. And then 1,400 years later, Jesus is with his friends, and they're commemorating this meal, this experience that their people had had. They had done this before many times, probably under happy occasions, but this time there was something different about this meal. Right, there were times when they had gathered and things were going great, right? They had reached viral status and Jesus was, going viral on all the social media channels. They were becoming the social media influencers just because they were hanging out with Jesus. The crowds, they were getting bigger and bigger, and the miracles were getting bigger and bigger. And then here they are in this particular Passover, the Last Supper, and things aren't going so well. The momentum has kind of shifted, and all their subscribers were unsubscribing. All of their followers were unfollowing, and there are rumors of a group of people who were trying to capture and kill Jesus. The disciples knew that, if Jesus went down, then they were all going down. And in the midst of these rumors, Jesus starts talking about his death and being taken. And when you read the accounts, it's almost like, it goes in one ear and out the other for the disciples. Because if I heard that, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to use up some vacation time I got stored up. And so they think, they're following the overthrower of the Roman oppressor, the Roman Empire. This Jesus is going to bring down the system. And it wasn't as extreme as slavery, but when these people lived under being subject of rule. The Romans said, hey, drop down and give me 50. You had to drop down and give me 50. If a Roman said, carry my sword or my shield or give me your coat, that's exactly what they had to do. But they figured, we got God on our side, and there's no way that you lose when you have God on your side. Because when God is present, you have more, and you don't have more uncertainty. There's less, right? When Jesus is on your side, the Son of God, then there's nothing to worry about. But Jesus is telling them, things are going to get worse. Guys, you don't understand. Things are going to get really bad over the next few hours. And Jesus is telling them what to expect. To which I'm sure the disciples say, then why are we going to Jerusalem again? Or why is this part of the plan? Why can't we just take a detour or go someplace else? Or can you imagine following somebody who's got a death wish? Because that's what it seems like. It seems like Jesus has got this death wish, and all he talks about is not being here and his death. And Jesus tells them, things are going to get really ugly. Follow me. So they sneak into Jerusalem under the cover of night. Not like the crowds that they had before, the week before, praising them and shouting Hosanna. They're being all cloak and dagger as they gather and probably not wanting to talk too loud. And Jesus is just throwing fuel into the fire of uncertainty. And listen, here's what he says. He says this. He says, when evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. And while they were there reclining, just relaxing and trying to enjoy the moment, eating, he said this. He said, truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. Right, this word betray is literally a handing over. You're going to kind of gift wrap me as a pretty present and just give me to the enemy. And when he says this, none of the disciples raised their hand to ask who, right? They knew who was coming after Jesus. They knew who wanted him because the momentum was shifting. And he says this, he says, one who is eating with me. Right, this just kind of magnifies the nature of this betrayal. You imagine bringing somebody into your room, into your home, having, meals were a sign of intimacy and relationship, much like they are in our culture. Right, we get together with people that we want to know better and that we trust and we do life with together. And Jesus is laying out the nature of the betrayal here. Somebody who I allowed into my inner circle to see me at my strongest, yes, but in the quiet times when the crowd wasn't there, at my lowest moments, you're going to betray me. And at this, the disciples responded. They were saddened. They were disappointed. And one by one, they said to him, surely you don't mean me, and surely not I. No, Jesus, not me. And then here Peter comes on the scene. It is one of the 12, he replied. One who dips bread into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as is written about him. But woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born. This book, the Bible that we live our lives around, it's full of stories of people living in the midst of great uncertainty. And as a nation, we're facing some of the greatest uncertainty like we've never faced before. And in these times, this is the perfect place to run the Bible. Whether you're a Christian or not, you probably have some kind of favorite verse or story that are taken out of these pages. You maybe didn't even know they were from the Bible. But they are. And it brings great comfort to know that he's still certain. The chances are that these stories were written during the times and seasons of great uncertainty in people's lives. This is not a book of a bunch of rich people having fun. It's not white people having fun. It's not, things were great today, and then tomorrow I got a new job, and then Wednesday I got a raise, and then Friday I was CEO. That's not how these stories pan out. Every single narrative that we draw hope from come from some kind of backdrop of uncertainty. It's the kinds of uncertainty that you begin to wonder, is God still there? Can I trust him? In the midst of uncertainty, when you couldn't even see God's hand, feel his presence, you felt MIA. It's in those stories that they discovered that God was still trustworthy. And if ever there was a time for us to pick up this book and these words and read it, it's now. These are the stories like Joseph, right? We read about teenager Joseph, and you thought you had sibling rivalries, right? You thought you're in bad relationship with your siblings. Joseph was thrown into a ditch, and on the outside of the ditch, he hears his brothers arguing. Yeah, should we kill him or should we sell him? Well, let's kill him. It's kind of ugly. Let's sell him. It's probably just better to be done with him. Let's kill him. That's sibling rivalry. But in the midst of that, even though we didn't see any physical manifestation of it, we learned that God was there with Joseph. We see King David, and King David has, one morning he wakes up and his son has raised up an army to overthrow the city and to kill him and take over. Right? You thought your kids were bad. Right? Imagine waking up one morning and they're on one of those little wooden stick horses and they got the neighborhood kids and they're going to overthrow the house and bring you down. And you wonder, you don't see God. God, where are you in the midst of this, in the midst of the bloodshed and the loss? But then we see, God was still there. There's the mother who had a baby son at a time when Pharaoh said, you know what? You guys are getting too numerous. We're going to kill all the firstborn babies, all the newborn babies. And her choice is, I either allow them to butcher my flesh and blood or I put it in the river, the Nile. And hopefully the crocodiles stay away. And she chooses just to set off her son into a basket into the Nile. And out of that, we wonder, God, where are you? But we see that God was there and brought Moses, their deliverer. Before she knew the end of the story and saw how God was going to work, God was there. Similarly, we see Mary and Joseph as King Herod hears about some kind of Savior that's going to be born, decides, I'm going to go out and kill all the newborn babies. And in the midst of that, Mary and Joseph flee to Egypt, of all places. And in the midst of the weeping and the wailing of this tragedy that just happened, senseless loss of life, I'm sure every Jewish person wondered, God, where are you in this? And we saw that God was there. That God still had the whole world in his hands. But then there's a plot twist, right? You've been doing this since you were children, but from now on, it's going to have a whole new meaning, Jesus is telling his disciples. You've been celebrating this meal, and Luke says, this is my body that has been broken for you, as Jesus is ripping the bread. And then the disciples, come on, Jesus, enough of that death and darkness and doom talk. We're done with that. You're bringing us down. If you're from God, then things have to work out, right? Things go well when you got God on your side. There's more certainty, not less. And what Jesus is doing, he's foreshadowing what's going to happen to him just a few hours later. And then they leave the place where they're having dinner and they go to a local garden to pray. And that's where things really start to unravel. Jesus says this, he says, you will all fall away, all of them. Not just some of them, not just one of them. You will all fall away. And for it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee, right? And then Peter, he's always the one sticking his foot in his mouth, right? And he speaks up and he says, enough, stop it with the death talk. You're making me feel uncomfortable, right? There's no way that we would allow this to happen to you. Because if God is with you and if God is with us and if you're the Son of God, then this isn't how the story goes. There's more faith, there's more certainty, there's more miracles. Right? And Peter says this, he makes this promise. He says, even if all fall away, I will not. Maybe they're a little weak-hearted, but I will not. Because that's not how the story is supposed to go. And then later that night, woke and lit Peter would get pointed out by this little girl as being one of Jesus' followers. Hey, aren't you one of those disciples? And he denied he even knew him. Jesus who? And in the midst of this, here's the question that lingers as we drift into feeling like there's just more uncertainty. Right? Maybe uncertainty in our families, maybe uncertainty in our jobs, and definitely in our nation and our cultures. We're wrestling with this battle for what's the right thing to say. Are we privileged, not privileged? I want to care, but the things that I say, now I'm being judged for how I feel, and uncertainty with our leaders and in scholarships in school. And the question is, can you trust God? Is it possible that God is still active, he's still accomplishing his purpose when there's no indication of his activity? That he could be active in your world, he could be active in my world when everything seems to be going backwards, when everything seems to just be getting darker. Can we trust him to be the personable God that he says he is, even when we don't see or sense his presence at all? In your story, you don't feel him. In our culture, in our country, and really, even in our world right now. God, where are you? And here, the reality is your answer and my answer to that question will determine our response to the continuing uncertainty that we're going to face. And the reason that we have to point this out is there's a dilemma. Right, especially for Americans, right? Us Americans who we tend to equate God with prosperity, and why not, right? We've been so prosperous as a nation, and we tend to equate God with forward motion and growth, and why not, right? Because most of us, all we've experienced is this forward motion and prosperity and technology boom. And we equate God's blessing as physical, tangible blessings. And why not, right? Because that's been our story. That's been our experience up to this point. And I would imagine if we went to the disciples, right, these men who are gathered in the upper room, and we asked them months later, guys, when was the darkest moment in your journey of following Jesus? When was the lowest point? And I'd imagine they would say, it began when we realized we were gathered all together that things were not going to get better. When we realized and came face to face with the reality that it was only going to get worse from here. That things were going to get crazier. It wasn't going to just be a handful of us falling away, but when all of us fell away. When we saw our leader arrested and he was beaten and he was executed and he died. Those hours were some of the darkest and lowest of our lives, because we had spent 3 years walking away from our livelihood to follow this man, and now it was all a waste. We realized, God wasn't up to anything. We're going to wake up tomorrow and the religious leaders are going to still have their power over us. The Roman Empire is going to just be even all the more angry at us. And maybe if we were to ask a follow-up question to that, where do you think God was doing his greatest work? Was it the miracles, right? Which miracle was the highlight of that journey? Was it the blind that Jesus healed? Was it the crippled that he allowed to walk? Was it the dead that he brought back to life? I mean, that's pretty awesome to see. And I gotta imagine they would answer, it was those same hours when it seemed to us, when it seemed like God was doing the least, when God seemed absent. It was in those same hours where God was doing his greatest work in us. When he seemed inactive, when he seemed like he was nowhere to be found, it really was then that he was most active. It was those dark hours where they were the epicenter for the salvation of all mankind, the starting point for a forward echo that would change the lives of everyone to go forward after. these would be the hours where people would, all over the world, begin to celebrate and look back and thank God for his goodness and his grace. But if you ask them then, those would be the last hours. We would have said, you know what, game over. It was all fake. It was all a scam. Our lives wasted. And that's hard for us to hear right now. Because just like they did when they came to arrest him, we want to pull out our swords and we want to start fighting for the cause. We want to go down. We're going to go down with the ship, and then we're going to be as violent and do whatever it takes. And Jesus says in that moment, I think that's a key picture for us in this time of uncertainty, where Jesus says, put down your swords. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. That's not the answer. Jesus, now is the time, he says, when we talk and we look at him, you're not doing anything. But that is the invitation for us in following God, right? As we lay down our lives and what seem like senseless, meaningless. Because he can take those broken things and do amazing work with them. When it's the 11th hour and the very last minute and nothing's been happening, and it's then that he does amazing work. And it's those situations we would never choose to do it that way. Right? You don't get any shares or likes on your social media platform that way. You don't get the attention that way. Because we would never let a bad situation go to waste. But that is God's way. The greatest things begin in the biggest messes. The most amazing works of God are generally launched in times of personal or maybe even national brokenness. This is, Forward Point, what God does. But the question is, will we continue to have faith even when we can't see his hand? And even when our faith begins to shake and falter and waver, maybe just hanging on by our fingernails. Now more than ever, the Bible, this is the place to go. Jesus is the person to look at, because he too, this movement was born out of great uncertainty. Because he still got the whole world in his hands. That's what he does. Well, that's neat, Jimmy, right? Maybe even a little inspirational, but that's not going to help me get a job. That's not going to help me put food on the table. It's not going to help me in my marriage. It's not going to help heal our country. It's not going to help make me well again. And you may be right. And never before have I felt such a burden and a passion to do, just to figure out what's more practical things that we can do to help more people in this time. And never has my heart been so heavy than these last few days, when I see such a disregard for the sanctity of life. Because that's really what it is, a disregard for the sanctity of life, be it based on someone's skin tone or be it based on being in a mother's womb. All life is precious and valued. And although that truth does not do anything to change our current circumstances, what it does allow us to do is to embrace the uncertainty with the certainty of knowing that God is still in control. Although life is uncertain, God is not uncertain. Although tensions and viruses and economy seem uncertain, God is not uncertain. He still has the whole world in his hands. And when we may just be holding on, it keeps us from letting go and from making decisions that only further complicate the circumstances. It allows us to be able to get out of bed at night and to have peace even in the midst of the storm. And it will teach us to keep an eye out for the activity of God that we would miss otherwise, as we're looking around and see where is God moving, and align ourselves and jump in. Even though life is uncertain, God is not. And he still has the whole world. He still has your world in his hands. A few months ago, I found myself in another Facebook post scandal. It seems, I'm not much to pick a fight or to get angry or upset, but when I do, I'm not very good at confrontation, so I tend to run to blasting it from the rooftops, the injustice that I feel that I've encountered. And in the midst of our, building our home and feeling like the land bank had kind of done us wrong, I took a picture from one of their new house projects that they were doing, a ribbon cutting ceremony. And I created this whole petition. I had people sign it online to bring accountability to the land bank. And I wasn't really thinking much about the people who purchased the house that I was using as the example of my frustration. And the next morning after I created this page and I made this post and said, look what's going on, look at the injustice that's happening, I woke up to some attacks from some people who were a part of the story that I didn't even know. And it wasn't shortly after some of my responses that immediately I was being called out as a racist. And it's one of those things where I just, I couldn't understand. If we knew each other, you would know that racism is, I really feel like it's nowhere even in my blood, not even a hint of it. Growing up, my best friend was of a different color. While I may not look it, I'm half Mexican, okay? And what I realize is that we're living on this powder keg that could explode at any time. And the answer is not to run to social media. The answer is to get out of our houses, to meet our neighbors, to go pick up trash. All right, last night there was all sorts of damage done here in Syracuse, and you know what? The call is to go out and to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Because I don't believe Jesus is going to be live on his Facebook page giving us a 3-point sermon about racism, about white privilege. I believe he's going to be in the trenches. He's going to be there amongst people fixing broken things. Because that's what he does. That's what he did with my life. And all the sins that we struggle with, the addictions, feelings of racism, they all come back to this spirit of fear and looking to control that which we don't understand and that which we fear. And we can only break out of that if we're willing to just come out of our bubble a little bit and let God help us to be his hands and feet to fix broken things here in our city. So over the next couple weeks, we're going to again just dive more into this idea to really wrestle with how can we be certain in a God who seems to be missing in action, so we can go into uncertainty certain that he's with us, because he still, church, got the whole world in his hands. Will you pray with me? God, we are so grateful that in the midst of, definitely in our culture and our world, seems our generation like the most uncertain time things have ever been, that you are still certain. God, our heart breaks for the senseless lives that have been lost over the history of mankind. From the beginning where Cain and Abel, and Cain said, I fear that God might like my brother more than me, so I'm going to remove my brother from the situation. And Cain killed his brother. To just a few days ago, a man was murdered on the streets. To the thousands and thousands of babies that are never given a chance. God, I pray that you would help us to come back to a place where we value the sanctity of life, all life. To the young teenage mom who's scared and alone, we would value her life. To the young man who tells his parents, I'm gay, God, we would learn to value the sanctity of life. We're not condoning actions. It's not our job to judge people's actions. But our call in following you and saying you're in our hearts and in our lives is to value all life. And we're sorry for the centuries and centuries of senseless death, the death that's come about as a result of other people's greeds. And God, our nature is flawed and we're broken. But you specialize in fixing broken things. So God, we want to give over our graves to you. We want to give over our bones. We want to give over our broken things because you make gardens out of them. You raise life out of them. And now more than ever, it's time for us to come together and to proclaim in this time of uncertainty, we are certain that this is who you are. In this time of uncertainty, we're going to come out of our house and we're going to pick up the pieces. And we're not just going to start conversations, but we're going to get to know people. God, help us to have an understanding beyond what normally we'd be able to do, to feel the pains that other people have gone through. God, to provide spaces where people can be open and vulnerable. God, give our leaders wisdom and direction. We pray for a spirit of peace over our city and over our country and over the world. And in this time where it feels uncertain, we're going to stake our lives on the fact that you are unchanging and certain, and that you still have the whole world in your hands.
you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. One more time, Waymaker. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
Father God, you are always working. You still got the whole world in your hands. You make a way where there seems to be no way. I pray we can just get honest with ourselves and honest with others. I pray that we can be vulnerable. I pray that we'd be loving. We can be able to speak the truth in love. But it has to start at home. It has to start inside. It can't just start with someone else. You give us jurisdiction of ourselves. That the world may know that you love each one person, each one of us. And it can just spread one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. Peace that can pass all understanding. Even when we don't see it and when we don't feel it, you're still on the throne. And we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. We love you guys. We'll see you very soon again. Be blessed.